Welcome to a special episode of the Tintin podcast. I'm Varun, and after closing our Prisoners of the Sun on the last pod, we are turning our attention to a long overlooked side of the Tintin universe, the women who appear in it. From the iconic to the underwritten, we'll explore how Hergé wrote his female characters, what they add to the stories, and why their presence or absence tells us as much about Tintin's world as does Tintin himself. Back from their riveting trip to Peru are Louisa, Maya, and Manisha.
Hello. Hi. Good morning to you.
Alongside Derek, the only one who could claim to be part of a second special so far.
Good day, everyone.
And Derek, back in that car special, we recall you counted around 200 cars spread across the series. When it comes to a similar census of the women, though, would it be fair to say that there are barely even 20 featured in these adventures?
Well, so there's probably more than 20. I counted that there are 14 named female characters, but there are several unnamed ones. So, for example, wherever you see Tintin in a crowd, you might chance upon a woman or two. But indeed, in comparison to the cars, I think there were more than 200 cars, but less than 14 named females. And I don't know how many unnamed females there are. But I took one sample, and that's Tintin in America. And I counted that there were 9 cars, including one ambulance, but only 5 women. And even in that book, there's one scene at the end where Tintin is feted by the Chicago crowd and he's going through hundreds and hundreds of people standing on top of a car. There's only one woman in the crowd, apart from all the other onlookers. So indeed, it's certainly fewer women than cars, I think. And I think the book with the highest proportion of females to males is the Castafiore Emerald, where I believe 25% of the named characters are women. And of the 24 official books, there are a full 12 of them have no named female characters at all. And actually, I'm being quite generous here because there are books such as Tintin in Tibet, and I think it was the Red Sea Sharks as well, whereby there are no women, but I counted them. No, it was Black Gold, sorry. Black Gold and Tintin in Tibet. Castafiore appeared over the radio. So she didn't actually appear in person, but she appeared over the radio, and I'm generally counting that as an appearance by a woman. So 12 out of 24 have no women at all, or no named women at all.
So half of the books are bereft of women, Manisha. Did you feel that while reading Tintin growing up, or is it a fact that's only become apparent in hindsight?
No, I think it's very much in hindsight for me. I didn't feel that, and partially maybe it was my own sort of inability to gender stereotype myself and say that I have to associate with only female characters. But there were days when I could be Tintin and days when I could be Haddock, and they didn't have to be female for me to be able to do that. But I think more notably for me, I think, just researching for this episode, Hergé seems to have kind of openly admitted, right, that he didn't know how to draw women. Maybe the explanation is as simple as that, this kind of lean clair style of drawing didn't really render itself very easily to be able to characterize and represent women and kind of the stereotypes associated with women at the time. And that might have presented a very literal challenge for Hergé in the way women are depicted.
And while you're on the mic, why don't you read out this bit of French for us? Maya has a point to make on why the quintessential Tintin adventure remains so male-powered.
Sure. Je ne connais rien aux femmes, je ne les ai jamais compris.
So the phrase basically means I don't know anything about women. I've never understood them. And that's actually Herge admitting it in an interview with Numa Satul, So to me, it reveals his own awareness regarding his limitations as a writer. I don't think he was ever confident in portraying female characters with any kind of depth or authenticity. He preferred to write within the bounds of what he felt comfortable with, and that, as we know, is a world of action, loyalty, slapstick humor, and of course, male bonding. And of course, mid 20th century Belgium was deeply patriarchal. I was reading about the other adventure fiction created around this time, and again, the women were largely sidelined or stereotyped. And Hergé himself was part of Boy Scout movement, again, a part of conservative Catholic publications. So, I think it's both Hergé's own limitations plus the surroundings around him, which led to this kind of a gender dynamic.
Sorry to keep you waiting, Louisa, but where do you stand on this? With the lack of women a reflection of Hergé's worldview, or perhaps a conscious thematic choice?
A little of column A and a little of column B. But first of all, only because we're talking about my gender being underrepresented, I'm going to gently seize credit for the idea behind this episode, because it stems from a childhood bereft of appropriate role models in my favorite comic. So I have a little bit of a personal bias about this. I will say that his sexism is obviously, a symptom of the patriarchal climate of the mid 20th century, as much as his racist depictions drew from that surrounding context of colonialism. But I argue that his continued perpetuation of gender stereotypes contrasts with the way that he seeks to repair those more egregious and insensitive racial depictions over time. Because the spectrum of female representation in Tintin, it remains grimly limited, from unpleasant and insufferable to hysterical and illogical. And it seems these characters are subject only to male utility. They're absent any unique dynamic personality traits aside from those that propel male interest and action. And that's why it kind of feels like he believes that we are genuinely lesser creatures, or that we lack the interests and agency that he permits his male characters to possess. Or wouldn't we have witnessed even like the faintest glimmer of quality representation in his work? And this is just my own theory, but I wonder if it's psychological because, of course, his paternal grandmother was a housemaid, and because of her commoner status, her progeny, including Hergé's dad, they were precluded from having acknowledgement or inheritance. So I think maybe the psychological implications of confronting the fallibility of his grandfather was too catastrophic compared to the ease of dismissing women as largely unlikable objects in a man's way. And that's just my theory. Not fighting words, I promise.
So I think Monisha and Maya said it well. Monisha mentioned, Hergé said, I didn't know how to draw women. Maya basically said, look, these women are only there to interrupt. And I think Louise also pointed out quite well that, look, the women are there for the male utility, to enhance the characters of the males, as opposed to develop the females in their own right. I will add, though, Hergé did have another series called Josette and Jocko, which was about a boy and a girl and a chimpanzee that goes around solving mysteries and adventures and so on. And Zette, who was a girl, was in every single episode. But the point is, it wasn't about a boy or a girl thing. She just happened to be a girl. Joe happened to be a boy. It's about teenagers having fun and adventures. And that's really what Tintin's all about, I think. I think it's just about a boy, young male reporter that goes about solving mysteries and behaving like Superman at times. But it's not about the gender, I think.
She might not be a teenager, Louisa, but Bianca Castafiore is the only recurring female character, from the main cast at least, and yet she's often reduced to comic relief without too many redeeming moments. Do you have a take on why Hergé chose not to flesh out her personality as completely as he did with other characters like Haddock, Calculus, or even the Thompson twins over time?
Well, I think that Castafiore is one of the strongest, as a character, she's some of the strongest evidence that either consciously or not, Hergé upheld this firmly patriarchal worldview, or at least he was creatively crippled by this mindset because he would not or could not flesh out her personality. And of course, she exists blatantly as a plot device to propel the male protagonist. She lacks the dynamic personality that he allows villains, heroes, and even animal characters. As no women have any of that, any of those same exciting traits or anything. So that's why I might be overthinking it, but the fact that intelligent and interesting women would have existed in countless forms around him, I'm sort of inclined to blame some sort of deeply ingrained dissonant misogyny preventing him as a forward-thinking and empathetic artist and a married man from bestowing upon his fellow human the same level of complexity he gives a terrier.
With that said, Manisha, there's a title with Castafiore at the helm, Mercy Her Jewels, of course. Arguably the only completed book where there's an attempt at romance, if you want to call it that. Were you glad that that didn't lead to much?
I think, yeah, I mean, I am glad. And I think I always, I mean, as I thought about, women in Tintin and sort of these specials, if you may, I always go back to like the kid version of myself, and how I may not have enjoyed or appreciated or even understood any kind of romance. I honestly had to go back and kind of look for it, as part of doing this analysis. And I think in those times, women were kind of most commonly associated with romance, just across the board, not just by Hergé in any fiction at that time. And Hergé seems to have consciously stayed away from romance. In fact, Tintin himself could almost be construed as asexual for most part of the book. And so I think, Hergé stated, in fact, quite openly that I don't think Tintin would marry. He's too busy. He has no time for that. With regards to Castafiore and Haddock, I think their reactions to this purported romance, if you may, is kind of pulls apart. Haddock is all flustered. He tries to flee. Castafiore is amused, albeit she's appalled. To me, this seems less like a struggle to develop romance. I think it's just satire on Hergé's part. And maybe more of a direct intent that women really played no role in adventure storytelling. He kind of said, okay, here's a woman. She could bring in a romantic angle, but hey, no, that's just, just for laughs. But having said that, I mean, I do want to say that if you kind of delve deeper into Casafiore's character, whilst she is portrayed as quite brash and unpleasant at surface level, she seems to be quite successful in her own right. I mean, the title of the book says it as well. So perhaps it's alluding to some kind of quiet assertion of female power that the patriarchy of those times did not understand.
I mean, Manisha's right there that she does have that power. But I think the kind of power that she has is very telling. And especially this romantic entrapment between the songstress and the captain. I think that is very transparent. And yes, I will say all of the women that Hergé includes pale, even compared to the Thompson twins. I think they have a lot more character. Whereas Castafiore, her power is in being unlikable. That is the most interesting aspect of her, down to the hideous profile and the shrieking vocals. So there's no love for her. There's no love felt for her, even though she performs for these many adoring fans. It comes off like cheap and soulless fame, like the medium of opera. Obviously, Hergé disliked or demeaned to some degree, but it comes off as for the gender as well, because of this personal struggle. It seems to cognitively equalize women with men. It's not the same kind of power or interesting character in any way compared to any of the male characters.
Coming in second place, Maya, is Peggy Alcazar of Tintin and the Picaros fame, where she comes across as a politically aware and an assertive character, if you like. Do you think that was a recurring figure cut short by the series' end, or do you reckon there was enough fuel only for that one-off appearance?
Okay, so I love this character. She's really politically aware, assertive, and quite dominating. Very much like Bengali women, to be honest. And she's far more confrontational than any of the other women, including Castafiore. But at the end of the day, I think she is meant to be finished off and not recurring. Even in the Picaros, she doesn't really deepen Tintin's world if you look at it. Her dominance over her husband is played for irony. She, of course, wields more power over the revolution than the general himself, but again, it's without being taken seriously ever. So once this joke plays out, I think her role is pretty much exhausted. And by the time I think Picaros came out, it was mid-70s, if I'm correct. That would have been a little too late for Hergé, I think. And let's see, proof of the pudding, she wasn't there in Alph Art either, was she? So yeah.
So I think, I mean, continuing along this kind of previous train of thought that I was having in terms of, strong, independent, if you may, women, Peggy almost represented the other side, if you may, of women power. So you have Castafiore being independent, romantically unattached. Peggy was shown to kind of have great influence over her husband. which at those times was probably the other type of powerful women, if you may. I don't think she would have been a recurring character, but more saw her as a call out to Herge's maybe fascination with the spectacle that he saw women to be, and then social power more broadly, even as though he continues to portray women through that male-centric lens.
Good point that, her not returning for the Alph Art, where there's another female character which we'll get to in a bit. Besides these, Derek, reporters, secretaries, and passers-by appear throughout the series, albeit always on the margins, as you pointed out up front. Would you like to highlight one character or the other that stands out in your opinion?
Yeah, sure. Again, going back to the Castafiore Emerald, the one with the most named female characters, there was one unnamed female character, and that was the gypsy or the Romani woman, who looked after the gypsies that camped in Captain Haddock's backyard. She seemed to be able to predict the future, and if you don't want to read the book, just see what she says in that one panel, and she predicts the entire book in that one paragraph after reading Captain Haddock's palm. In addition, she was kind and gentle, and she recognized that Haddock and Tintin were good people, unlike the distrust that the other members of the Romani people had for them. The other thing, and I will add, is that Hergé put in a cameo appearance of his first wife, Germaine Kikens, in when in the Golden Scepter. Sorry, what is it? The
King Ottokar's
Scepter, right? King Ottokar's Scepter. When Tintin received his award of the Order of the Golden Pelican from the king, Germaine is in there with all of the other aristocrats in the throne room, and she is definitely the most beautiful woman in the throne room. If you care to have a look at that picture, she's on the right.
Good stuff. For our YouTube audience, you can check it out on the screen, of course. Did you like Derek's pics as well, Louisa?
Oh, yes, I do, because my favorite characters as well are the Romani Chiromancer and that little gypsy girl in the camp, because they embody more interesting spirit and spunk than basically all his other female characters combined. Maybe due to the deviant nature of the culture as beheld by colonialist sympathizers. I think they're just a far cry from the dead-eyed flight attendant who appears in like 2 books, it seems, but they're different women, but they both look kind of dead-eyed. Or those many various weeping or fainting dames, or the repugnant wife types. Like Peggy Alcazar, I don't like her as much as an example of female power, because I think her power is limited. It's just an existence of cleaning up after her husband, and I don't think I don't know. I mean, being politically aware is a little bit of an evolution, but for the most part, she's an appendage, and being assertive is not really something that they lack, the women in his stories. It's just that they don't have value or virtue of their own. It's like there's a vacuum in place of all the women that should be existing. So I will say, of the many ladies, or the few rather, I like the way he renders Mrs. Clarkson in Crystal Balls, the wife of the photographer on the expedition, because even though she is just another male appendage, her features have more strength and intelligence and beauty in them than he reserves for basically any other speaking role with double X chromosomes. So it helps to, as far as when I'm reading it, that she doesn't faint. She gets emotionally distraught and she can still power on. It's like, because I find that sort of an unfortunate and offensive trope that we see a lot of characters faint that are women, like the stage psychic in that very scene. So it's like, yeah, the bar's on the floor here.
Now, about that character in the Alph Art, Derek, there are accounts going around about Hergé penning a love interest for Tintin. Now, I confess I haven't read the book yet. I should before we reach that episode. So what is that sequence all about?
So let's go back in history first before I answer that question. So the Alph Art was Hergé's final book. It's incomplete. Just like, all great people, all great composers sometimes don't complete their symphonies. and Hergé only managed a draft sketch of Alph Art, and he finished until approximately page 43 as to what of the book that we know today. The book that we know today, or the most common one available, is written by a fan by the name of Yves Rodier, and it's an unlicensed tribute to Hergé. It's unofficial. So Hergé Yves added additional storylines to complete it to 62 pages. So everything up until page 43 is Hergé's. Everything after page 43 is Yves'. And this particular panel with regards to Tintin forming some attraction to the secretary was an invention by Yves. And I just can't imagine Hergé ever putting that in a Tintin comic, as I mentioned earlier. And so, and Monish has mentioned as well, look, it's all about male centricity and Louisa mentioned male utility. And you know, he just actually didn't know how to draw women, didn't know anything about women. As Maya said, it's really unlikely that Hergé would ever have drawn this into his book.
Have you read any version of the Alph Art yourself, Louisa?
I unfortunately haven't either, because it always made me too sad to think that Hergé died in the middle of it. But I do need to read it. Definitely. I think knowing that Yves Rodier was 17 years old makes me a little bit impressed by, you know, his ability to do that style pretty well. But it's so obvious just looking at those panels that this is not Hergé's work. And it's obvious because Tintin until now is like deliberately designed without any kind of sexual inklings or anything related to that. And it's clear from a single dialogue with this woman that she also has more depth and agency than any of the women that Hergé ever engendered for his own plots, because this woman has a career. She references her parents, which hints at a life of her own beyond male utility. A depiction that's very justifiable and equalized, sadly, unlike any done by the actual creator of Tintin. So if I had this scene as a child, maybe I would have been less depressed by my gender's representation, but it doesn't count because it's not really Tintin.
Just to give our listeners a behind-the-scenes take on how we do things in this board, we also carry a doc with some questions often targeted at individual panelists, and here's one for Louisa here. If you could reimagine one Tintin adventure with a strong female character at its center, either as an ally or an antagonist, which one would it be, and would the story be better off for it?
Well, I thought this was a really good question, Brian, because I really had to think about this one, and I used process of elimination to determine like what the strongest character as a female would be. So I threw out all the plots where Tintin would be a glorified savior because I don't want to beget that tired old damsel trope. So I settled on Skut. Skut is Polish for skirt, first of all, so he should have been a woman. Skut is not really a real name for a man, as far as my research has concluded. So I kept coming back to Skut being he would be a profound improvement upon the dull representation of my gender. He's mysterious, he's battle-scarred, talented in combat, he's an enemy fighter pilot, but he's a subsequent loyal friend, daring, he's not a weak link, he's not dependent on stronger interests, he's certainly not an appendage of anybody else, because he jumps rank for ethical ideology, he holds his own in fights, he's got this raw, one-eyed bravery, he's a savvy survivor, and most importantly, his power is inherent to his own character. And he has this capacity to serve our heroes no matter the kind of adventure, but he has this particularly deft piloting prowess. So Skut, as a woman, in short, would have been exactly the kind of idol that I would have died happy seeing in Tintin, as I was, you know, a wannabe tough, adventurous little girl, and I was looking for exactly that kind of character, just anything dynamic. But Skut, I think, would be the ultimate woman.
How about you, Manisha?
Well, maybe from the sounds of it, Snowy would have been a good option as a female character. But I mean, someone else who I thought would be interesting, not just one story, but maybe a recurring character that would be fun to see as a female is Rastapopoulos. He's a master of manipulation, charming, in disguise, and it could have really worked all those traits for a female antagonist. It would have also potentially added some psychological complexity, I think, with a woman sort of manipulating empires behind the scenes in a world that underestimates her by everything that we can see. I mean, think of Rastapopula, glam girl by day, underworld boss by night. Would have been pretty cool.
And what would Snowy's girl name be, Maya?
I would think Snowy would still be called Snowy in English, but she would probably have a pink bow, very impeccably groomed, and no patience for Tintin disappearing into crypts or jungles without proper planning. Maybe Nilu with a bit of standards. And maybe, just maybe, if Snowy had been female, I think Hergé might have finally written a female character in series who gets to speak in every book and even live through each of the adventures and never once get kidnapped or caricatured. Honestly, that's all I can say.
I was actually hoping you'd say Mary Louise. After all, Snowy's French name, Milou, is a portmanteau of Mary Louise, borrowed from the nickname of Hergé's first girlfriend, Mary Louise Van Cutsum. What do you think about that one, Louisa?
A couple things. For one, I feel very stupid on one level because I naively assumed all my life that Milou was just like the diminutive term for snow-covered in French. I never actually looked it up. So I just assumed it was like a direct translation of snowy. So I've even gone so far as to like name animals Milou if they were white and so forth. But the fact that it's a portmanteau of two female names, first of all, what an actual pity, because that could have been a speaking, thinking, bravely acting protagonist of my gender, but it's without the benefit of representing females, but has a female name. And I can only imagine Marie Louise herself was a little mystified why her namesake would be male. Furthermore, what did his wife think of this legacy tribute to his girlfriend, his first girlfriend? And that just makes me wonder, like, how did Tintin meet Milou? That's neither here nor there, but surely he ages about as much as that boy reporter, despite many years passing. So Milou, very interesting.
And not to make specials, Derek, but would you have enjoyed seeing a woman driver or two in a Tintin adventure of your choice?
Women drivers? I doubt it. Don't think Hergé would ever have dreamed of having a woman drive a car. They should be at home knitting and playing with kittens. No, I don't think so. But all jokes apart, Louisa mentioned Scoot as a good example of a potentially woman. Scoot, incidentally, was supposed to be an Estonian, and it's not really an Estonian name, as Louisa points out. It's not Polish or Estonian, but the original French name was Zut, S-Z-U-T, which in French sounds like it's an exclamation of annoyance, like damn or something like that. So when Captain Haddock first meets Zut, Captain Haddock was annoyed that Piotr Zut was exclaiming some annoyance when he met Haddock. So that's why you've got the whole series there. But yes, Zut or Scoot in English.
Let's close things out, Maya. Do you reckon the Tintin books have aged worse than the competition because of the lack of women in them? Asterix, for example, had loads of women characters throughout its run.
I think I agree. It has aged better than Tintin, partly because of the gender issue. If you look at it, unlike Asterix, which features a range of women, there's Panasia, who is Obelix's crush. Then there is geriatric. I keep forgetting, but quite a few women in the village fabric. So, they are present, they are vocal, they're part of the social hierarchy over there. It helps. On the other hand, the lack of women in Tintin makes the series feel quite narrow, especially if you look at modern day readers, right? Especially in 2025, where folks are looking for more inclusive and representative narratives. Off the topic, we know Tintin also grapples with other controversial elements though, such as colonial stereotypes, racial caricatures. So I think together with the lack of gender representation, it does kind of age badly, Tintin.
Derek?
So I think it was written by a couple of characters called Goscinny and Uderzo. I think Uderzo died in the 70s. Goscinny died in the 70s, and Uderzo sold off his stake to another company, and that company has continued and today continues to publish Asterix series, new Asterix books in alignment with the times that we live in. And I haven't read the newer ones yet, but the newer ones probably are more reflective of the times that we live in, and presumably have more women being actively part of the adventures. But I will mention this though. Maya pointed out that look, we've got Geriatrix's wife, and actually she doesn't have a name, believe it or not. She's just Mrs. Geriatrix. So that's also an indication of, not necessarily putting women in the limelight there. And you've got Impedimenta, which is the wife of the chief.
Vital statistics.
Yeah, exactly. Vital statistics wife. And again, I kind of liken her to Peggy Alcazar, right? Peggy Alcazar was there to enhance the character of General Alcazar, because General Alcazar was supposed to be this dominant guy, and then he's suddenly very submissive towards his wife. So Peggy Alcazar was a one-dimensional character just to enhance the character of General Alcazar. And I kind of feel the same with Impedimenta. I think she's a bit more diverse, and she does have a little bit more dimensions to her. But again, it's vital statistics playing the role of General Alcazar being submissive to his dominant wife. So there you go. There's some linkages there.
Your final thoughts, Louisa and Manisha?
So yeah, my final thoughts are just, I don't want anyone to attack me, because I really love Hergé, and I want to get that clear that I don't think that he overtly, consciously chose to degrade women. I think that it was a limitation, like everybody is saying, it was a limitation of his. But I do think that we need to be a little bit critical of how that that sort of shackled his ability to give us equal representation, and sort of question. I mean, for me, I'm just curious about his married life, his personal life. It's nice that he drew his wife through Maine in one of the pictures there, but for the most part, his women are not very rendered very beautifully or anything. I mean, sometimes, but for the most part, it's kind of like so. And also, Tintin is like so firmly asexual, and it's such a boys' club. It just makes me wonder. So I want to say that Tintin is above and beyond my favorite comic of all time. So I'm not against Hergé. I am going to say I'm biased because my father's a women's studies professor, so that probably has something to do with it. Why I, as a little girl, was like, I demand more from this comic, But please understand, I do have empathy for Hergé and his own limitations. I don't think he wanted to make us feel that way necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very intriguing because I think looking at each book independently and the story and picturization is one aspect, but looking across them, it was quite interesting, and also looking at it from the lens of, if I may call myself an adult, was fun for me. I don't know. I think I chose to look at it with the viewpoint that Hergé was just representing his time, and not consciously misrepresenting women in any way. But maybe that was just my bias because I loved her comic strip so much.
And that's a wrap on our special episode exploring the women in Tintin. From the overlooked to the unforgettable, it's been fascinating diving into how Hergé addressed the women of his universe. Next up, we head back into the main series with Land of Black Gold, where Tintin finds himself caught in a web of sabotage, shifting alliances, and a Middle Eastern adventure decades in the making. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as we continue our journey with the Tintin podcast.